And welcome everyone to this super exciting um, discussion call, organizing call on launching local partyist committees. My name is Spencer. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm from Reform and Revolution Caucus. I'm also a member of Portland DSA, and I'm super excited to be here with everyone. We have a few really amazing panelists that are going to share perspectives from three different chapters across the country about party building, political independence, and running campaigns. And I'm going to kick it over to them in just a moment. But before that, I'm going to do a little off the cuff introduction. But yeah, this political moment is really significant, obviously. There's a genocide in Palestine. The Democratic Party has proven itself totally inept, really, in the face of the rising right wing and Trump and the Republicans. And the socialist movement is in a key position. We're at kind of a turning point, I would say. We've seen the victories of many campaigns for office, including the Zohran campaign, including local ballot measures and organizing around the country. We're just coming off of a really successful, really inspiring DSA national convention. And these things are happening at the same time as climate crisis, mass deportations, and the genocide in Palestine, and so much more. And what this means is, now is the time to really strategize, to dig deep, to connect our local campaigns and the organizing we're doing to our broader theory of change and to sort of strategize on how we can fight back. And that's what we're here to do today. So now I'm going to kick it over to our panelists who are going to introduce themselves real quick. And then we're going to go into some of our questions. So the order of run of show today is going to be introductions. We're going to have three discussion questions that the panelists will each answer. And then I'm going to invite another comrade to present on a template resolution on party building that we're going to share with folks that we'd like folks to consider workshopping, editing, adapting, and proposing in your chapters and in your local work. And then we're going to have some audience questions and discussions. My comrade Henry is going to be moderating the Zoom and the Zoom chat. So if you have questions, feel free to ask, and we will get things sorted out. So yeah, that's the deal. I will try my best to keep my eye on the Zoom chat as well, but obviously a little chaotic. So first off, introductions. So we are going to go in this order. We're going to go Jordan, then Isaac, and then Sarah. So why don't you go ahead first, Jordan, and introduce yourself?
All right, sounds good. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Jordan Garces. I'm the co-chair of the Rhode Island DSA chapter. I go use he, him pronouns. I'm currently on caucus. And I've been organizing within the DSA for about 2 years now. Joined a couple years ago when I was just like, I need to do something. I want to make the world a better place, just trying to actually fight for something. Um, and now here I am, 2 years later.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. All right, and now we have Isaac.
Hey there, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Isaac. I use he, they pronouns. I am in the Southern Idaho DSA chapter. I'm the co-chair, and I'm also in the Emerge caucus. Um, I've been in DSA on and off for like 3 years now. I joined a while ago in about 2021 and then left because there wasn't much organizing happening in my area, and recently rejoined late 2024 to found the Southern Idaho chapter, and I've been working in the community ever since.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. All right, and now we have Sarah for our last introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Milner. I'm a member of DSA's National Political Committee. I am based out of Portland, DSA. I'm a trans woman and a union member. I'm a letter carrier in ALC Branch 82. And I am uh, excited to be here because I'm excited to talk about the concrete steps we can take both in our chapter and on the NPC to help build an alternative political party. I was also the electoral working group co-chair of Portland DSA, which is something I'll talk more about a little bit later on.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Alrighty, so before actually we get into the first question, we are going to go to Henry on some. there's a little echo there. We're going to go to Henry on some ground rules for folks, and then we will. Henry, could you mute whoever is?
Yeah, it's Paul, I think.
Yeah. And then we're going to go for Henry to ground rules, and then we're going to go to the first question. And the order for the first question is going to be Isaac, then Sarah, then Jordan. So go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, most people don't need this, but just the last, I mean, it always happens, or sometimes it happens, but comrades, we want to have, we're not trying to control people. We want to have a discussion. You don't have to agree with everything. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. If you have a disagreement, feel free to raise it. If you want to use the chat to express and have a commentary, you're totally welcome to. But no attacking other comrades, no being disrespectful. I may give you a warning. I may just boot you. We're here to have a comradely discussion, and we don't foresee any issues, but you've been warned. So don't. It's not our goal to kick anyone out, but we're not afraid to do it if we have to protect the integrity of everyone else and their experience. So, but thanks for being here and welcome everyone. Let's get it underway.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Alrighty. So now we're going to go to question number 1. And the order, like I said, is Isaac, then Sarah, then Jordan. And the question is, why is it important to gain independence from the Democratic Party apparatus locally? Should DSI prioritize this more as an organization? So that's our first question. Go ahead, Isaac.
Well, I think the very first thing we need to start out with is that DSA is not the Democratic Party. We are not seeking to be in the Democratic Party based on resolutions that have passed at multiple conventions now, including the most recent one. Our goal ultimately is to form a new party, and whatever form that may take, that's our goal. And in order to do that, we have to start locally. We can't start top down, otherwise, the infrastructure is not going to be there in all of our chapters. So really, it's up to the chapters at the ground level to start doing these things and start making these infrastructure and platform reforms to get our chapters in line with that goal. Whatever conditions that your chapter's in, I think it's important to start doing that now on my own chapter's conditions. I'll talk about this a little more in the next question, but really the Democratic Party in Idaho, where I'm from, doesn't really exist. Yeah, they exist, but they don't run candidates really. They have a few districts that they stay in, and their candidates always win those districts, and they don't try to break out from those districts. Just recently, today actually, one of the Democratic Party officials in Idaho, in my district, who is running for a state house seat, just announced that he's actually not running as a Democrat. He's running as an independent, which shows you how little faith even Democratic Party officials have in their own party in Idaho. And I'm sure it's the same for many other states, especially red states, where people in the Democratic Party don't have faith in their own party to back them up and actually win elections. So if the Democratic Party doesn't have faith in their own party, why should we? Why should we continue to stick with this strategy of inserting ourselves into the Democratic Party infrastructure when we have the capability and we have the resources to build our own infrastructure and build our own electoral projects that doesn't just have to, go to the ballot box every 2 years. Instead, we can work on organizing our own communities and use that to build into electoral work rather than focusing only on electoral work. I think I answered every part of that question. If not, feel free to ask the other part, but I think I answered that sufficiently.
Yeah. Thank you, Isaac. That was really good. Alrighty. So now we will go to Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
The issue of our relationship to the Democratic Party is central to our entire project of building working class power in DSA. We are socialists. The Democratic Party is not. We are anti-imperialist. The Democratic Party is not. We stand for the power of the working class. The Democratic Party does not. We are an actually democratic organization. The Democratic Party is not. And yet we are tied in with the Democratic Party. Millions of potential socialist voters are registered as Democrats right now. Almost all of our most prominent elected officials were elected on the Democratic ballot line. Almost all of our campaigns are run on the Democratic ballot line. More and more, we are seeing that this means our electoral project is built on hostile territory twice over. Not only are we socialists trying to work and organize in the capitalist state, trying to gain concessions and put forward our own politics, we are also working and organizing within a capitalist party, a party run and organized by capitalists, funded by capitalists with capitalist leadership. We see this play out all over the place. After Zoran Mamdani won the primary, fair and square, Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams challenged him in the general election. Corporate Democrats doing their own dirty break to try to tank a socialist candidate. After Omar Fateh in Minneapolis won the endorsement fair and square, the state party intervened to steal it from him, to overrule the will of their own party members. After Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush criticized Israel, Democratic Majority for Israel and AIPAC poured millions of dollars into purging them from office. And those confrontations are only one part of the story. Fighting within this hostile party also comes with the grave risk of betrayal. AOC, the most prominent socialist outside of Bernie Sanders, spoke at the DNC. She defended genocide Joe Biden. She brazenly lied that Kamala Harris was fighting tirelessly for a ceasefire while describing a war that Harris was backing. Bernie Sanders, the man who galvanized the socialist movement. I mean, I'm a socialist right now because of Bernie, but he looked the public in the eye and told them Joe Biden was fine and competent to remain president when everybody could tell that he wasn't. When our politicians say things like this, it damages more than just their individual reputation. Our movement doesn't have floods of billionaire cash. It doesn't have backing from big donors. We live and die on our credibility. We can only win if we can mobilize people because they actually believe in it. And when we lie to try and ingratiate ourselves further with the Democratic Party, we hurt that credibility. It's not just individual politicians selling out, it's selling out the very foundations of our political project. So what's this got to do with local work? Well, local organizing is where the rubber meets the road on breaking away from this hostile party. I spent the last year visiting chapters across the country, and in almost all of them, I heard local versions of basically the same conflicts I just talked about. Some are left-wingers facing primaries for moderate Democrats or purges and attacks they've faced since October 7th. Some saw their own candidates buckle under the pressure and make mistakes or make terrible concessions. But it doesn't have to be like this. Our local chapters can be a starting point for a bold new strategy of building towards political independence and tearing apart the Democratic Party by running as clear, open socialists wherever we run and galvanizing support amongst the people who want to see something different. Across the country, there are hundreds of cities and regions where we can begin to build our own political structures. Hundreds more where even when we do run on the Democratic ballot line, we can put forward a clear, aggressive, principled strategy that pushes back against the Democratic leadership and the Democratic Party as a whole. How can we do this? Well, there are a few steps we can take. First of all, there are races all across the country where we don't need to run as Democrats. Nonpartisan elections, which are the default electoral setup for many of the city council elections in the biggest cities in the country, as well as many key down ballot races in states and cities across the country. We don't have to run as Democrats. We should never run as Democrats. They're nonpartisan for a reason, and we can brand ourselves independently. Races in deep red or deep blue seats where there's effectively only one existing party right now. Races where there is a high third party vote in previous elections, races where we have extremely strong popular DSA chapters. We can't do all of these things all at once, and we can't snap our fingers and make a new party overnight in every ballot line in the country. But what we can do is we can begin tearing away from the Democratic Party, galvanizing people by strategically demonstrating the capacity for independence, by pushing horizons forward. When we do run as Democrats, we can run on a clear socialist program, a program that actively advertises DSA and foregrounds the necessity of building the power of the working class. We can run accountable campaigns that are democratically rooted in DSA. We can use the backing of DSA to clearly advertise and build our own socialist profile and not just the campaigns of the candidate. And we can run agitational campaigns that are clear that to pass anything, they're going to need more than just winning a primary or winning an election, but a mass movement of working class people in the streets to force not only the Republican, but also the reticent conservative capitalist Democrat to implement actually radical policies. If we understand our oppositional role, if we have a clear analysis of the political nature of the Democrat, then we can navigate the ballot line question in a way that uses tactical flexibility, not just to avoid having to ask these questions, but to build for political independence and build a socialist party of our own. That work starts at a local level.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. All right, next we have Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. The other panelists, they've been hitting on the head. They've been saying a lot of great points. I think that the break from the Democratic Party is both internally and externally as an organization, probably one of the more important things that, like, as an organization, we have to decide upon. Because for internally, when you talk to people that are like, we have to run in the Democratic Party, it's just what we got to do. They're always conceding that essentially the Democrats will always be more powerful than us. We're not here to make the Democrats a little bit better. We're not here to like get the little crumbs. We're here to actually enact socialism. And socialism is not just better capitalism. It's overthrowing the entire capitalist state. So to do that, we actually have to build real power that can contest the Democrats and Republicans in the capitalist power. We can't just siphon off of their power because, like, as got brought up with like Zoran, he was literally at odds with the party itself. They were trying to take away as many resources as possible. He might, like, I don't know the exact details of the campaign, but compared to like a different Democrat, like a more moderate Democrat, he probably was just running as difficult as running as an independent. And then I think externally, and so in my chapter, we've already decided to completely break from the Democratic Party. We're doing canvassing now for running in 2026, and just talking to people on the ground, you can literally see like the refreshment in their face when you're talking to them, and you're like, we're not running as Democrats. I was actually talking to this one woman yesterday who said, I'm completely out of politics. I'm just not a part of this. It doesn't work for people like you and me. Or she's like, it doesn't work for people like me, like, I'm dealing with all this other stuff. And I was like, I agree with you. And like I turned in like a 10-minute conversation, I turned this woman from someone who is not political, she considered apolitical, she said she stays out of it. I got her to say that she would vote for a candidate, and that she also took extra palm cards to give to other members of her family because she felt that this was something different. We're not just trying to be progressive Democrats, trying to do something different. We like when we talk to people on the street about what we're doing, we don't have to take in the baggage of the Democratic Party. We don't have to say, oh, we're running as Democrats, but forget about all the other stuff we did. We're doing it slightly different. At that point, why do we need a name? If anything, the name is a hindrance to us than it ever will be like something that can actually help us in winning like the actual working class people. And like Sarah mentioned, we're not just here to win elections. I think that's another thing that a lot of people bring up is that it makes it easier to win an election, to run as a Democrat, to soften your message. Don't say the scary socialist word and stuff like that. But we're just not here to win elections. That's not going to do what we actually need to do. We're actually here to build a movement that can give the power back to the people. We're not up there to, just try and do these little battles for the people.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. All right, that was a good first question, folks. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to question number 2, which I'm going to put in the chat here. And the order for this one is going to be Sarah, then Jordan, and then Isaac. So why don't you go ahead, Sarah?
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to share the incredible work that we've been doing in Portland. So, Spencer, sorry, could you tell the question to the audience?
Oh, that's right. I forgot to read this question.
I
put it in the chat, but I forgot to read the question. My bad. Okay, so this question is, how has your chapter moved towards organizing a local party? What are the unique opportunities and obstacles you face in your area. My bad for not reading that. That's the question. It's in the chat also. And now you can go ahead again, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm excited to share the work we've been doing in Portland. So in Portland, we arrived at an enormous opportunity a few years ago when there was a major proposal to change the city charter. We help advocate for a more radical change to the charter and then help this proposal pass. And what this change did is it instituted nonpartisan elections, it got rid of primaries, and it created multi-member, regionally bound districts elected with ranked choice voting. In other words, it made it so we didn't have to run as a party in a city council election, and it dramatically reduced the win number we needed. These seemingly technical changes opened up huge opportunity for socialists to elect people. Seeing this opportunity, myself and Comrade Spencer, alongside others, worked to draft a new endorsement policy to make it possible to run candidates. As a matter of fact, we actually needed to reduce how hard it was to run candidates in Portland because we had an old policy that was kind of prohibitive. So we wrote this new policy and we created standards for candidates, a process for endorsements, an endorsement questionnaire, and most importantly, I think, we created an SIOC, a Socialists in Office Committee, before we had run anyone for office. We then began our candidate search and we began the endorsement process. We ended up choosing to endorse two candidates, Mitch Green and Tiffany Coyle-Mullane, and there were a number of other people who came relatively close, but for various reasons didn't reach the threshold to get endorsed. As it happens, though, two more of those people, Angelita Murillo and Samir Kanal, also ended up winning their election. After the elections, as they were working closely with DSA and were DSA members, it was determined by our Socialist in Office Committee that they should also participate. In other words, we had kind of the incredible situation of only running two candidates and yet electing four. Now, our chapter negotiated and debated all of these standards democratically. We put forward a proposal, it was debated on, things changed, we figured out how to implement it. And as we went through the process of endorsing candidates, an interesting thing happened. We actually began to outgrow elements of the policy. We found its limitations through our debates. And I'm happy to admit, as one of the authors of the policy, that as much as I tried to predict everything ahead of time, there were certainly things that we messed up, we didn't get right. As we went forward, what we found was that though we had tried to create sort of a tiered system, a higher tier for cadre endorsees and a lower tier for external endorsees, all of the candidates were applying for external endorsement, but then the members themselves were not willing to endorse people unless they met a higher standard than the sort of floor for external endorsees. In other words, the membership and the candidates kind of unconsciously worked together to create a middle tier in between the two that everybody was held to. This actually has created some meaningful problems because we have a gap between the standards we had tried to set and the standards the members are democratically putting forward. And so we need to adjust our own policy. There were other things we did that were really important. We relied on the support that national DSA and staff can provide. We had discussions about how closely tied candidates should be to DSA, how we should run campaigns, how things should work. And we had debates. Should people run as open socialists, etc.? Milo, our electoral director, and Haley, who was at the time our regional organizer, came to Portland and visited, and they encouraged our chapter to be more ambitious, to fight for candidates who are held to clearer standards. More than anything, though, we relied on our manpower as members, and I want to give a shout out especially to Aiden and Jesse, two comrades from R&R, who played an absolutely pivotal role, knocking tons of doors, putting together electoral canvases. And what we found was that because we had the power to change elections, connect to people, talk to people, and convince people at scale, and build up a political machine no one else was able to build up, we could convince people of a lot of things, including our own candidates. So what happened? Well, as I mentioned, these were nonpartisan elections. And so in our city council elections, we didn't run as Democrats because there wasn't a party to run as. We were open about being DSA members, and increasingly, although this took some negotiating and fights, our members were open as being socialist. And we won. With our 4 DSA members on city council, a third of the city council is socialist. And a recent newspaper article put it pretty bluntly. They said, Portland is a 2-party town. One party is the Democratic Party, the other party is DSA. And yet, unfortunately, it's not so simple as just being recognized by a local alt weekly. We've taken a huge step forward, but we still have problems or challenges we need to overcome. We lack a unified program. We struggle with coordination, and sometimes we struggle to clearly differentiate ourselves from Democrats. In our conversation today, we'll be talking about different strategies to break from the Democratic Party. And in Portland, we are not trying to do a clean break. We do run candidates as Democrats too. Farah Chaichi, our state representative, ran and won in a Democratic primary twice over. And I think that that was an important part of building up our base and political machine and connecting to people. We also found that electing people and working with them is really, really hard. And it doesn't come down so much to just like, are they strong people personally? I have seen comrades who have been in the chapter for years make decisions I thought were opportunist. I have seen people who have only recently joined the chapter in our electoral program take incredibly bold and intelligent and brave stands kind of on their own instinct. What we found is that discipline alone isn't really enough. To convince comrades, and this includes comrades with staffing roles, comrades with key influence over electeds, and the electeds themselves, we've learned that the most effective thing to do is articulating clear expectations early on. Let them know what they are getting into, what you expect, and how you will support them, providing positive plans of action to make sure these expectations are implementable, and most importantly, building trust among comrades, keeping them engaged in the political life and social space of the chapter, talking to members, talking to leadership, having a robust back and forth where they can ask for help and we can clearly communicate our needs, staying up to date on their needs and worries, and actually treating them like comrades. Elected officials face enormous pressures. Holding office, even just a city council role, is a bewildering crosswind of pressures, challenges, danger from media, conservative forces, rapid fire, tough decisions. If you want to build a party, you need to be ready to meet that challenge. So, what are some things we could do that I think could help make Portland a more party-like chapter? Fighting all the time as a coordinated campaigning force, putting forward a clear alternative vision of the city that can be distinctly said to be, this is the socialist vision for what we want Portland to be. Forcing through dramatic transitional proposals. Well, we have accomplished a lot, including reallocating money that would have been given to cops, to parks, and fighting for things like increased protections for renters. There's still a lot more to do. I would like to have flagship proposals where I can say, see this big policy change that happened because of DSA. Building up widespread consciousness of our political ideas, building DSA by consistently agitating and talking to people, and ultimately building beyond election, because a party of the kind we want to build cannot just be something that runs every 2 or every 4 years. We need to build up media. We need to build up social services. We need to build up political education. We need to build up our labor mobilization. We need to build up our housing campaigns. We need to be a robust social force that is present in people's day-to-day lives. And if we can accomplish that, then we can turn that newspaper article into more than just an exciting description on the factions on city council. We can make it a fact in the day-to-day life of people in Portland.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Next, we have Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. So what the steps that our chapter has taken is back in 2023, our chapter had voted to be a completely clean break chapter. So that means that we are no longer running as Democrats at all. Like that's just a hard stance within our chapter. We're running as independent only with the future hope of getting a ballot line, like some kind of DSA ballot line down the line. We're not opposed to working with Democrats if we had elected officials, on some bills or something like that, but we're no longer running as Democrats. The other thing that we're doing too is on the way of making sure that we can build our actual power, and we're not just using other people's powers, that we are only running cadre members. So DSA does not, or our chapter does not endorse candidates. Our chapter puts up candidates. Our chapter runs candidates. And we found that incredibly important. And one of the things that we are trying to figure out right now is making sure that candidates are doing what the chapter wants. So that's the biggest question right now that we are attempting to solve, because we don't want to get stuck in a situation where we have someone in office and then we have no way of like make sure they have the expectations ahead of time, or that they are just going to go off and do their own thing because they think that's better, not what the chapter wanted. One of the other, on the electoral side, the important things that we're trying to hammer too is that the candidate does not matter. Of course, when you're running an election, it's great to have a charismatic person, someone that can speak clearly, articulate well, kind of can at least put on the facade of a politician. But at the end of the day, we are trying to make it so that our candidates are just a arm of the DSA. These are not people that work with the DSA. They are the DSA. They're putting forward DSA policies, and they come back to DSA when they need to know, like, how should we vote on this kind of thing? Should we vote for leadership membership? Like, we are trying to go for even more robust socialists in office rather than having a relationship with the candidates. The candidates are beholden to DSA and the membership of DSA. And that is also very important as to why we are breaking from the Democratic Party, because if you're running as a Democrat, you're running as this progressive Democrat, but you still have the Democrats behind you that, if DSA were to drop you because of some reason, you still have those people to fall upon. We're trying to have a hard separation so that our candidates are DSA through and through. And one of the other important things that Sarah was hammer home at the end as well is that this is just purely kind of the electoral side of things. But DSA is not just electoral. It is not just our electoral committee. DSA is an entire movement. So that means that our labor, when we're going to do strikes and we're working with unions, when we're fighting for healthcare for all, when we're doing political education, all of these things wrap, like, we think of the party as DSA as a whole. So DSA's campaign is getting the ideas, getting being in people's day-to-day lives so that the people know what DSA is. And then when we go to put up a candidate, they should already know what we stand for. If we go to a ballot line and someone has to ask, what is a DSA? We have failed our mission. And that is through and through, not just because we want clout and stuff like that, but because people should know our ideas and they should be out there. We need something to contest these other kind of Democrats and also the progressive Democrats. And there needs to be that clear delineation, which is why we are, pushing hard as socialists. But we also understand, and this is important too, that we don't just make change through electeds. We don't make changes through the ballots. We need real on the ground organizing, and we're trying to increase everyone's political consciousness so that we can, build a movement from the ground up. We're not just trying to get enough electeds in to start pushing through socialist policies. The main part of our campaign too is agitation. So we have said that if we, go and run a candidate and, we get 10 new people to join DSA through that, but we get a candidate in, versus if we got, 500 people to join DSA and we lost that election, that second one is easily the much better win. Because even if we do get a candidate in, they're not going to do as much as having 500 new activated socialists would ever be able to do. I think that to answer the question of unique opportunities and obstacles, we are a one-party state. So we have been fully Democrat for the past I think it's 80 years or something insane like that. We might have 5 Republicans across every seat in the entire state. And Republicans don't even run as independent; they just run as Democrats, because you just that's just what you do. Everyone here is a Democrat, no matter what. You have the most insane pull of in the Democratic Party. So we are developing the tools. So if people have been out canvassing, or for a Democrat, you might have used Minivan, which is an incredibly great tool for canvassing. Our chapter is building an alternative to Minivan. We know that the NTC is also building one, but we don't know what the state of it is. So we decided to take on the undertaking. I work as a software engineer for my day job, so I'm one of the people that is heading that kind of project. And we just understand that there are a lot of the things, but we don't want to have to rely on the capitalist tools, because the second that we are any sort of threat to them, they're going to take that away. Even though it sucks, even though we're going to start small, you have to start somewhere. And that is where we are starting now. We're actually building the foundation right now so that we can call ourselves an actual force against the Democratic Party.
Great.
Um,
Thank you, Jordan. And next we have, sorry, I didn't interrupt. Next you have Isaac. Go ahead, Isaac.
sorry. Um, I really like what Jordan said about, uh, you know, how Rhode Island is like a one-party state. Because here in Idaho, we also are a one-party state essentially. But Idaho is different from Portland and Rhode Island in the fact that we have practically no Democrats. Like I said earlier, um, the Democratic Party has no faith in themselves. And often the actual literal strategy passed down by the Democratic Central Committee is to instruct their voters to register as Republicans and vote in the Republican primary for the quote unquote moderate Republican. Um, and they also do the strategy of they run independent candidates. And then as soon as they find their golden moderate Republican, they tell all the independents to drop out. And that's how they cohere their strategy into trying to pull like the Idaho Republican Party away from, less extreme positions, but it's not working. The Idaho Republican Party is getting more extreme as these Democrats continue to capitulate to them after every single like obstacle on every single position. Like our most prominent Democrat in Idaho, Monica Church, she is part of the Church dynasty. You may know Frank Church, who was head of the Church committee that uncovered a lot of CIA crimes. Monica Church is his granddaughter, I believe, maybe great granddaughter. No, it's granddaughter. And she is the most moderate, like Democrat in the state, essentially, and she's the most prominent as well. And she is good friends with my state legislator, Clint Hostetler, who is a far right, essentially a fascist. He believes in chemtrails, a QAnoner. He's a sovereign citizen type guy. And she pals around with him all day in the state legislature. And she's actually working with a essentially far right neo-Nazi think tank called the Idaho Freedom Foundation to build a required high school class about saving quote unquote Western civilization. These are the type of Democrats we have in Idaho. And that is why my chapter, along with many other circumstances, decided to completely break from the Democratic Party earlier this year. I wrote a resolution for the National Convention called Declaring Independence from the Democrats, Clean Break. It did not get the signatures required to get onto the convention floor, but we passed a local version of it at my chapter general meeting around that time. And ever since then, we have, worked to establish our own independent infrastructure from the Democratic Party. And many people on this call might know, but my chapter just recently launched a gubernatorial campaign in Idaho on a independent ticket. We are running our candidate, Maxine Durand, as a cadre candidate. She is putting forward a socialist vision for Idaho. And at this point, we've had one town hall event the other day on Thursday. And all the local news agencies covered it. The majority of responses on social media have been positive rather than negative. Obviously, there is still some negative comments because there are some bigoted people in Idaho. I'm here to confirm, yes, neo-Nazis live in Idaho, and I'm very sad about it, but they exist. But nevertheless, the majority of responses we've seen on social media to Maxine have been positive. And even just today, on the Idaho Reddit page, some people have been saying that, I lean more conservative, but after reading her platform, I really agree with this, and I think I'm going to vote for her. And that is where I think that a lot of people in DSA don't think about. I wrote an article about this for my caucus publication, Partisan, before convention, that rural and red state areas are often overlooked by DSA as a whole and DSA national and but you can win here. And I agree that running a governor campaign is going to be a really uphill battle, especially in a state like Idaho. But from the small amount of time that we have been running this campaign, I really think we have a fighting chance. And even if we don't win, we'll have built DSA. And Maxine is partnering with every single DSA chapter in Idaho. We've all endorsed her. And very shortly, we're going to be going for a national endorsement for DSA and really assert themselves and, make the world and the country know that we are eventually going to break from the Democrats. And what that means is we have to run our own independent campaigns. And as far as unique opportunities and obstacles, in our local community in Southern Idaho, the city of Twin Falls, it's a pretty conservative area, but there are some little pockets. The biggest obstacle we've had is people being opposed to us, running our own campaigns and, criticizing the Democratic Party. And weirdly, we've seen a lot more support from, like I said, people that are Republicans or people that are more conservative in that area. They are more receptive to us criticizing both parties. But people that lean more liberal, more Democrat, they're very hostile to us when we do that. Serious in the Democratic Party, and that we actually care about, working class people, rather than, the Democratic Party cozying up with the Republicans and essentially capitulating to them on every single turn. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. All right. That was a good second question. And now we're going to move to our third and final question. And then after that, we'll do template resolution and audience questions. So get your questions in mind, folks, because that will be soon. But our third question is in the chat, and the order for this is going to be Jordan, then Isaac, and then Sarah. And the question is, how can local chapters begin towards building a party? How does this look different for bigger chapters and smaller chapters? And Jordan will be going first this time.
So I've been in DSA for about 2 years now. This is like joining DSA. This is my first time organizing, I guess, around anything. This is the first time in my life where I've called myself like a hard socialist. I've had these ideas before, and this is the only chapter that I've ever been in. So to answer the question of how does this look different for bigger and smaller chapters, I don't know if I can really answer the nitty gritty of it, but I do think that there is one common thing that no matter what chapter you are, no matter where you are, I think this will apply to you. I think you just have to believe that it can be done. I think you just have to, you can't tell yourself that it's where I'm running is incredibly special. There are so many circumstances that makes it literally impossible to start a party, or makes it super hard to separate yourself from the Democratic Party. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but I do think that one of the biggest hurdles for us, as DSA, as socialists, is literally just telling us ourselves that this is possible. Because sometimes I even feel it's such a massive thing, right? It's such a massive thing to say, we need to end capitalism. The system that's going on for so long. But it's just at some point we have to believe that it can be done, and we have to take the hard decisions. To overthrow a system that is brutally without care, just killing so many people, and it's been around for hundreds of years, it's not going to be easy. There is no easy solution like just running as Democrats. I think that you just have to make that first step of saying, this is what I'm going to commit to do. And then from that point, I know that each and every one of us here, we're all smart, we're all people, we all have brains. You will figure it out. But the first step has to be that you have to know that that can be done. We've run into pitfall after pitfall by trying to get this electoral project up and running. We were going to run in 2024. We were going to run with 6 months on the clock. We knew that the kind of project that we wanted to run, we would have botched the whole thing. So that's why we actually strategically waited until 2026. We've been planning this for about a year and a half now, because we wanted to make sure that we could do it right. And it as you start digging into it, as you start taking on this monumental problem, there will be the little chunks of work. You can copy some of the stuff that Democrats do. For example, the Van app. It's a great app. I don't agree with the Democratic Party, but it's a great tool. So that's why we are copying that tool and making it so that's accessible for us. And we're also trying to publish that for other chapters and stuff like that once we get it up and running. And then it's just once you start canvassing, it's oh, how do we talk to people on the streets? How do we get people to vote independent? And it's just you will figure it out. Just by canvassing and talking to people, I think you'll understand they inherently understand that these parties are not for people like us, even though they might not be able to say like, oh, it's a capitalist party and like they have these interests and all this kind of stuff. The people can feel that kind of stuff. So if you come with a really earnest take and a really like we are trying to build a party and you talk to like normal working class people, they know that you're going to be different than the other Democrats that are trying to whip your vote and be like, oh, but like we support like black people, so come vote for us. Like we're the best party out there. Like the Republicans hate black people, so that means by default you have to vote for us. It's like, but what do you like when they ask a Democrat what they're gonna get? They say you're not gonna get Donald Trump. You're not gonna get a Republican in office. But we actually have something to offer people. So I think that's why our chapters found it so important to have that hard distinction because we don't have to take any of that baggage and we are actually offering something really good and it's gonna take time to build up, but I know that we can all do it. It's and I don't think that that's gonna change from smaller to bigger chapter. I think really it's just gonna be your capacity. Capacity is gonna be the biggest thing. Like we have a small chapter. Our electoral team is about 10 people right now, like real active people, and it's a big project, but it's like we're taking it day by day and we're just trying to figure it out.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. All right. Now we have Isaac. Go ahead, Isaac.
Well, similar to Jordan, I can't really answer how it's going to look different for bigger chapters and smaller chapters because the only really context I have is a small chapter like mine. I'm not sure how many members Rhode Island DSA has, but Southern Idaho DSA has about like 50 or 60, and our electoral committee is barely existing now. We have just really about to formalize it next week. So we're going big or going home, and the stated goal of this campaign is of Maxine's campaign is not only to establish herself as a champion and she's very open about that in all of her campaign speeches and anything that she talks about regarding this. And I believe at our chapter convention, we might be putting together a sort of exploratory committee to establish an actual state DSA party. And really what we have to do is really put ourselves out there, and we have to be willing to argue with people that might really generally agree with us on most things. Like the people in the Democratic Party in my city, we agree on a lot. We also disagree on a lot. And I have to be willing to tell them when they're wrong. And I have to be willing to, say that I'm better than them on some things. Like, it's just that simple. The Democratic Party is a party of genocide in Gaza. They broke the rail strike back when Joe Biden was president with the support of basically every Democrat, and including even some of our DSA electeds voted for that. And I think in order to, really start doing this, we have to start now. And, we can't just wait for far in the future when the national DSA has its shit together, for lack of a better word. We have to do it now, and we have to start now. And that means examining the conditions in our local chapters and our local areas, what laws there are to starting a new party, what the infrastructure and the landscape for an independent socialist campaign is. And it's going to look different everywhere. It's going to look different in Idaho. It's going to look different in Portland. It's going to look different in Rhode Island. It's going to look different in New York City. And I'm of the opinion that even Zoran Mamdani could have won as an independent socialist candidate in New York City. And, I know there were some conversations going on around that, before the primary was over. Like, if he loses, do we run as an independent? And I was pretty involved in those conversations. I was really pushing, if he loses, God forbid, I really think he's got a chance to win. And because of the great volunteer infrastructure that New York City DSA has, they could have done amazing things as an independent. But, thankfully Zoran won the primary, which gives him a little bit more legitimacy. But even then, I still think he could have won. So yeah, that's basically the answer to that.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. All right. And now last on the third question is Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
So the first thing you need to do if you would like to take steps towards being a party-like organization is have an electoral program. And I know that maybe sounds very basic, but a lot of chapters don't. We didn't in Portland when we got started with this project. So right off the bat, you need to build an electoral working group if you don't have one, pass an endorsement policy, establish a socialist in office committee, begin searching for candidates to run and races to run in. If you don't figure these things out, they're going to sneak up on you. And especially come 2026, which is going to be a big wave year when a lot of people are going to get elected, you might find someone who doesn't agree with all of your politics, but who the chapter still either wants to support or has to support, or other things happen, kind of sneaking up on you. So be proactive, build an electoral program before you think you'll need one. We started ours like a year before we were running anybody. After that, to get anywhere, to even get off the ground, you need to find a political opening in your local context. You need to have something that is related to people's immediate needs that you can talk to them about. I remember back in 2020 when we ran some of our first candidates, we ran this candidate, Paige Kreisman, against a Democratic politician who had supported cuts to public employee pensions. This time around, we talked a lot about housing because that is a pivotal issue right now, and homelessness in our city, our plan to address it. It might be different in your city. Maybe it will be some scandal with the local Democrats. Maybe it'll be Palestine. Maybe it'll be a corruption issue. Maybe it'll be a local public transit service that needs to be built. But the key is you need to go out, talk to unions, talk to your chapter members, talk to people in your community, and actually understand the needs of people you're trying to convince. If you want to have any hope of building a party, you need to build up your credibility and have deep roots in your community. You need to start recruiting people, good member onboarding, good branding for your chapter, good comms, good messaging. You need to connect to as many of the socialists in your city as you can, and connect to as many of the people you can turn into socialists and make them socialists. You should be running other kinds of campaigns, right? Like maybe pressuring city council on, say a sanctuary city bill, or unionization campaigns, or ballot initiatives, or organizing large protests, or, doing even relatively small things like flyering, canvassing your neighborhoods, putting up posters, talking to people about your chapter and your idea. Because what you need to do is build strong ties with labor and other local left formations and become a visible presence in your community. When someone knocks on a door and says, "I'm the DSA candidate," you need people to know what that means. You have to prove you can win if you want people to take you seriously. This is really tough, but it's true. And that means looking for races where you have a clear chance to at least make a lot of progress. You don't necessarily have to win everything overnight to be taken seriously, but if you get clobbered, people are going to stop listening to you. So what that means is nailing down the basics, stuff like cutting turf, writing scripts, knocking doors, managing campaign finance laws, finding a race where you can clearly challenge and think you can get a big chunk of the vote against the incumbent, where people are already frustrated, where you can get endorsement from people outside of the chapter, a district that is advantageous to your position. You can look, for example, a great place to search, although it's a little outdated now, is where did Bernie Sanders do best in your city? Or where did that local ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage or legalize marijuana do well? Those are places where you can find prospective voters for politics. As you do this, you can rely on National for support. National has a lot of things we can provide, offering things like electoral skills training, resources, advice on legal compliance, electoral grants, win number trackers to figure out how many votes you need to get, visit from staff and NPC members, high-profile comm, mentorship on the NEC, and connections to socialists across the country who have tried this sort of thing before. National also offers us political touchstones with our newly strengthened endorsement policies. Thanks to the NEC consensus resolution, we're committed to upholding workers deserve more, which is, in my opinion, not a strong enough articulation of our politics, but is a good place to start, a good standard to have. And importantly, we have the Fighting Anti-Zionist resolution, which passed and clearly committed us to anti-imperialist principles. We can talk about those principles when we're running for office. As you do these sorts of campaigns, you can begin to act like a party. Clear independent messaging, criticism of Democratic Party leadership, running on a clear working class platform, putting forward your own vision for your city with a distinctly socialist message, building up a strong campaigning and mobilizing infrastructure so you can quickly turn out large numbers of members to support things like strikes, protests, react to current events, back up your politician. And of course, I can't hammer this home enough, a strong recruitment infrastructure to make sure all that work you're doing is building your capacity rather than just burning out your members. You can begin to be more party-like by identifying openly as socialists. And you should always be sharpening your message, thinking about what worked and what didn't, tailoring it to your local context to make sure you're advertising DSA as strongly as possible as a worthwhile political alternative in your city. As you build up party-like infrastructures, you can also build towards de facto or legal party status. In some places where there are nonpartisan elections or fusion tickets, it will be pretty reasonable for you to essentially be identified as a party. And I think we can all push for our chapters to expect to be seen that way. In other places, it will be very, very hard. In my personal opinion, there are still plenty of places where it makes the most sense, at least to begin with, in party building to continue running on the Democratic line. Or maybe places where it only makes sense to run a few experimental independent campaigns. But as we push forward with all of this, we have to be grounded in that clear socialist program and brand as DSA. However we run, people need to know who we are and what we stand for. And I do think as we push forward with this work, it will have an amplifying effect. Imagine how galvanizing it will be, the first winning campaign to challenge both a Republican and a Democrat. Think of the inspiration that will come when the first chapters really break through on this. Think of the people in other cities who will be inspired by it. Think of the people who want to break from the Democrats but don't think that it is possible right now. I think that small chapters have a special role to play in this. Big chapters like mine in Portland might grab the headlines. But in smaller towns, rural areas, red states, the places that both the big parties have kind of abandoned or a small clique of political leaders run basically on their own, there's a huge opportunity to break through as the only organized force opposing the far right now. Wins in these smaller chapters can help galvanize our work across all of DSA. Just like Zoran's win remade the electoral map in New York City and helped pull thousands into our movement, imagine if we prove that something different is possible in places where the possibility of change has been foreclosed for so long. People will dive into work. They want to fight in places like Idaho and Rhode Island. People will listen to us, but it's our job to speak to them with a message that feels possible and to run winning campaigns. The last thing I want to say is we need to be ready for defeats. Right? Running as an independent is really hard. And sometimes we are going to lose. And when we lose, a whole bunch of people, not only in the media and the Democratic Party, but also within our own organization, are going to say, look, this is why it's not possible. This is why we shouldn't do it. And there are two things we must avoid. The first is just getting burnt out and saying, oh my God, no one will ever listen. This will never work. If we give up, we're never going to be able to build on the strong lessons of what happened. But the other thing is just doubling down and saying there's nothing to add. We are trying to do something that nobody has really pulled off successfully in our country in a long time. We are trying to build a new party and tear apart an existing one, right? This is going to be a very difficult process. We are going to make a lot of mistakes as we figure out how to do it right. We're going to have to be very patient, very determined, very deliberate. And so we should move forward urgently to try to change things now, to try to implement things now. And at the same time, we have to be very rigorous and clear in learning the lessons of the failures and the mistakes so that when there are setbacks, we build upon them. And just as we build DSA, we build the partyist wing of DSA, win or lose.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. All right, so that brings us to the end of our preset question and answer sort of period. And now we're going to do a quick presentation on a sample resolution. So I'm going to invite Aiden to hop on in a moment here. I might need to make Aiden co-host to do that. So I'm going to make you co-host. And then I'm also going to send the text of the sample resolution in the chat so folks can see it, and then so we can discuss it. So Aiden, are you able to go? Are you able to?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just share my screen real quick. Let's see.
And
Cool.
Aiden, why don't you introduce yourself also? Just
Yeah.
say who you are, why people should care about what you have to say.
Yes. Sorry, thank you. Hi, I'm Aiden, he, him pronouns. I am from Portland DSA. I'm the one of the electoral working group co-chairs there. That also puts me on our socialist and office committee. So I spend a lot of my time doing this kind of work and thinking, and both in the long-term planning for it and in the day-to-day coordinating with our electeds. Yeah, I guess since all of you can pull up the text of the resolution, which Spencer just sent, I'll focus more on like the resolve sections of it. A lot of the whereas is stuff that we were talking about the broader context leading up to this. So we put this together pretty quickly just as to give a framework for what these kind of committees could look like. So obviously the starting point for all of these is doing research into what kind of changes make sense in your local context. So we kind of pulled together a list of the different things you need to focus on. So things like the Socialist and Office Committee and how the like communication between electeds and membership and democratic decision-making process and that works. Updates to the endorsement policy to get full membership buy-in. Focusing on prioritization of campaigns and standards for electeds. Party infrastructure, legal requirements in your area. Building up a process for recruitment of members to run for office, and how to kind of prep everyone for doing that, and being able to democratically select who's doing that. Finding which districts you want to run in, what kind of races you want to run, and then what kind of your ballot line approach is going to be. That's hi, here's my cat. His name is Barley. Whether you're doing nonpartisan races, independents, your own ballot line, and trying to track that out for a couple years ahead, so that you have a longer term thing to push towards. How that ties into your broader work as a chapter with any of the other work you're doing, whether that be labor or like anti-ICE work, any other working groups that exist in the chapter, and how to tie them in. So a non-exhaustive list of things to like focus that research towards. Here at the end, like we just left a section open, similar to up in the whereas clauses, that you can plug in stuff that's more specific to your chapter. And some of that, will be like decisions on how you want to have your committee like put together and what timeline makes sense. For like the committee, you could have it be something where it's like appointed by your chapter like steering committee, or have it something that's more of an open committee under the electoral working group, or have a like little coalition of representatives from different working groups that all have like roles to play in how you're going to be showing up in your canvassing. And then timeline, make sure that whatever like timeline for research you set up still gives you time to actually implement things by the time that you want to be running whatever campaigns you're looking towards. So if you're wanting to run folks in this in the 2026 campaign. If that's going to need to be in the primary season, you're going to have to like get this, implement it really quickly, and get the research done by winter time, so then you can start really building in to run. Yeah, that was just a quick overview. I think a lot of the stuff probably just, if anyone's got questions about how this would look, putting this into like an actual thing forward to the chapter, I'd be happy to answer those. Because yeah, this is definitely just like a thing to help you get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Aiden. Yeah, Aiden was the #1 canvasser in Portland DSA for the 2024 cycle. He's very modest about that, but
$2,000 in like 3 months.
Everyone, that's really an amazing achievement, and a big part of our campaigns here. So anyways, who has questions about the template resolution for Aiden? Who has things they'd like to bring up? We'll do questions for the panelists after this, right? So hold on to your questions for that. But does anyone have questions about this resolution, or about how they would go about advocating for this, or anything like that? Okay. If not, that's okay too. You can always text us back at the number that you got a text message from for this meeting, and we'll connect with you and help you work on it. Alrighty, so now we're going to do some questions for our panelists. So we're going to have time for 3 audience questions. We'll see how quick they go, maybe less, maybe more, but 3 is the goal. And what we're going to do is, if you have a question, please put it in the chat or get on Stack, and we'll try to go around to different people. Also, if you have a question for a particular panelist, mention that, so we can know who to direct it to. There was a question from Michael up above. There's AJ on Stack, there's Justin on Stack, and there's Aldo, who has a question as well. So I guess we'll just go in order, I think. And yeah, panelists, if you can keep your responses quick, that'll be ideal. And not everyone needs to answer every question, right? So if you want to let other people answer it, you can do so. So maybe panelists, use your raise hand function if you want to answer the question that I'm reading out. That's what I'll do. So Michael has this question, which there's a lot of context to it. So read in the chat. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But Michael has had a question about when we talk about a party, are we talking about using a party to build working class power, by building a non-violent movement to overthrow the capitalist order without playing by the rules of the capitalist system? Basically talking about this question of a party as like an electoral vehicle, or a party as like a broader political force for revolution and change and that sort of stuff. So I know I didn't phrase it as a question, but I think it's a worthwhile topic. So who has things to say about that? I see Isaac and Jordan. Let's do Isaac first.
Okay. And before I begin, I do see Michael has his camera on. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before I start answering?
Thanks. And it makes sense to have condensed my question, but I do want to emphasize, I understand everyone's talking about building a party not only for electoral work, but as a tactic for building a powerful movement. But is the goal of that movement to create transformative change by electing people and pressuring our governments to do the right thing, or is it for actual nonviolent but revolutionary overthrow? Because for reasons I put in the chat, I think they'll resist anything else by any means necessary. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the way I think about a party is not in the traditional sense that most people think of when they hear party, they hear electoral politics only. I think of it in the Marxist sense, where the party is a vehicle for class struggle. And electoralism is just one thing, a part of that toolbox. And honestly, I think it's the last thing we should be focusing on when it comes to, class struggle and building a movement for socialism. And I think that we have to be willing to pull out any tools in our toolbox, like, for like moving forward class struggle. But electoralism should not be the only thing we do. And that's where I feel like a lot of people in the socialist movement and DSA even especially go wrong, because they feel electoralism and appealing to those in power and begging our representatives, call and write representatives, is the only way we can make change. We have, in order to do that, to go that route, we have, and a lot of our principles to go that route. And I think when we do electoralism, we have to put forward candidates that are willing to unapologetically push our politics. And I think that a lot of the resolutions that were put up at convention this year, as far as discipline for electeds and red lines and stuff, are stuff that we have to implement as a party. Because when we go the electoral route, we have to have candidates and cadre candidates that aren't going to concede on what our principles are as a party. So hopefully that answered your question. But yeah, that's my opinion on.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. Now Jordan.
Oh, you're still muted, Jordan.
Oh, wow, that's embarrassing. I was just gonna say, Isaac hit the head on a nail. Like, he took almost all the words out of my mouth. Like, when we talk about when we're doing party building, electoral is just one leg of the party, but it's not the encompassing point of the party. Like, when we're working with unions, when we're working with like doing campaigns for like Medicare for all and stuff like that, we're doing a lot of agitation campaigns. Like, one of the big points of trying to get someone in the office is so that you have someone that's in there, and then say we put up a bill that's like, we want to build this socialized housing, right? Then you can force all of the Democrats, the progressive Democrats, to have to vote that down, and then you have a much stronger leg to stand on to say, we tried to put this thing up, we're trying to get these things out, but they're literally just not allowing it. So the point of that is, one, to kind of pull the veil of the curtain of like what goes on in the state house, what goes on, in the government, to show that, these parties are for corporate interests, they are for the capitalists only, while trying to put up our own politics, like Isaac said, to give an alternative to that kind of stuff. We don't want a better version of their politics. We want a completely separate version of politics. And that is what the party structure should encompass in all parts of it, not just the electoralism.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. And now Sarah is raising her hand. So go ahead, Sarah.
When I think about what it would mean to try and build our own party, the two models I think of are Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks and the abolitionists in the United States. The ruling class is not going to just hand over power to ordinary people. And we saw with Salvador Allende in Chile that even if there were to be a majority to institute dramatic changes to society, we'll just ignore the majority and try and silence our will, right? So why should we contest elections then? Well, I think if you look at Lenin and Marx, what they say is we contest elections to try to build the power of the working class, to build the movement from below, to fight for the real meaningful reforms we can win right now to change people's lives, to give the working class greater capacity to organize, to raise their horizons higher. And what we see, I think, with the abolitionist movement is that an election can precipitate a crisis where transformative things can happen. Imagine what would happen if, say, a socialist president were to be elected somehow, or to get close to an election and not back down from the principles, not capitulate, stay clear and strong about fighting for organized workers to take power in their workplace, whatever the consequence may be to big business. The ruling class is going to fight back, and we need to be prepared to defend the will and the interest of the people. So when I think about what it means to have a rupture with the capitalist system, to me that is referring to the moment when socialists genuinely threaten to nationalize large parts of industry, and the capitalist class tries to shut us down. And we are willing to defend the desire of the people who wanted us to institute socialism. So to me, that is what party building looks like. And this is why it is so important that we always be focused on building power from below, building mass movements, convincing people of socialism, because ultimately we are trying to build the power of the working class, not just build the power of like a, a section representing the working class in this or that legislature.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. All right, that's a good first question. We're probably not going to get to all the questions, folks. I'm sorry. But we'll just sort of play it by ear a bit with the panelists on when to end. But the next question is from AJ. So go ahead, AJ.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
This one's for Isaac. So you guys are running a independent for Idaho governor, if I'm correct in that assessment. What can people outside of like do to help you guys? And like, why haven't I heard more about this from National DSA? Thank you.
Well, first thing you can do is follow us on social medias. You can follow my chapter at Southern Idaho DSA on Instagram and Facebook, and on Twitter we're South Idaho DSA because the handle was too long to fit. And you can follow Duran for Idaho on all those platforms as well. You can also go to our website, shoot us, or Maxine's website, sorry, duranforidaho.com. Shoot her a donation if you have the means. The goal is to get $10,000 donated by February, and honestly, we're on great track. We're already at 10% of the way there. We're less than 2 months of the way through the campaign. February is the filing date to actually get on the ballot. We need 1,000 signatures. So share any of her posts, elevate it to people who you think might be able to reach people in Idaho. And as far as the why you haven't heard more about this from National DSA, mostly because we kind of launched the campaign really early. Like I said, the February is the filing date, so technically nobody's running for governor right now because no one's on the ballot. So we figured we needed to launch early in order to get our name out there and start siphoning voters away from both the Democrats and the Republicans, but also because it's an uphill climb, and we have to take as much time as possible in order to reach this big goal. And the former NPC had a lot less people that I think would be willing to jump on this kind of campaign. And I'm happy to say that with the convention over, there are a lot more people on the NPC and the National Electoral Committee that are willing to take risks and experiment in campaigns like this. And we haven't applied for national endorsement yet, but very soon we will be, going through that process. And I'm very hopeful that the national organization will choose to endorse. There are some things that we need to fix and sort of clarify in the campaign in order to, make that process more smooth and likely to get the endorsement. But we're seeing a lot of support on social media lately, mostly because we finally have some news articles covering us in local publications, and we're starting to see an uptick in followers. And anything anybody on this call can do to help us out in that goal, whether it's shooting us a $5 donation on duranforidaho.com, whether that's signing up to volunteer. You guys don't live in Idaho, you can help us text bank when we get there. So yeah, thank you, AJ, for the question about that.
Great. Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Isaac. All right. Now we have a question from Justin.
Yeah, thank you very much for these insightful answers. My question is kind of about the local context. All three of you have local context that you've added that is different, but I think, for example, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, so our local context is, at least in the upper Midwest as a whole, is pretty different, I'd say, in terms of like level of democracy within state politics, as well as the kind of political competitiveness of the state. So each one of your states is Rhode Island, a Democratic Party state, Idaho, a Republican Party state, Oregon, a Democratic Party state, all single party states. So I guess any insight that any of you might have into how might this partyist strategy look in a politically contested state with very liberal cities and not so liberal suburbs and exurbs and rural areas that are kind of in balance in political competition between two state parties that currently exist. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Very good question. I will go to Jordan and then Isaac.
I will unmute first this time. So what our chapter, like our kind of analysis on the situation is, and I don't think anyone is going to disagree here, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are the party of the capitalists. The Republican Party is just a party of capitalists plus racism. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, like the policies they push and the kind of their like theory of change and how they view the world is really not that different. And I think if you hammer home on those points, like we could, like, for example, when Obama was president and he had supermajority across all of the different sectors of government. And, he ran on trying to get Roe v. Wade legalized and put into the actual law. That just never happened. And, they can try to come up with their like BS excuse of like, oh, we didn't want to push things through. We're trying to be nice. We're trying to be like democratic. But it's just like, at the end of the day, you can kind of like ask people to ask that question of like, why do those things not happen? And I think that's one of the benefits of being in a one-party state. But in a two-party state, they still like kind of fight in the same direction. And I think you can kind of like message on that point where it's they're all giving corporate tax breaks, like running on a party line of we're not going to give corporate tax breaks. We're only working like through the people and stuff like that. I think that's the kind of message that you could go for in a two-party state to differentiate yourself clearly from both parties.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. And now Isaac.
Well, I'll say that first prefacing this, I've never lived in a state that's politically contested. I was born in Oklahoma. I lived in Washington for a little bit. I lived in Missouri for a little bit, and I've lived in Idaho the majority of my life. So take what I say with a grain of salt, because many people on here might have, more nuanced and more correct, quote unquote, experiences than me in regards to this topic. But from what I see in this situation is that the chapter or state chapter or organization as a whole needs to really identify the district, the whatever political formation that you'd be running in, like the specific place that has the best chance for an independent socialist option, whether that be a popular progressive that got primaried and lost by a very small margin, whether that is an unpopular incumbent in either party. And if you guys have the infrastructure, that's key, having the infrastructure to be able to make this sort of thing happen. I say this as a very small chapter running a very difficult statewide campaign that we hardly have the infrastructure for. But if a chapter like New York City or even a smaller chapter has the infrastructure and the will to make something like this happen, it can happen. You guys just have to put your mind to it and really like cohere your strategy around your specific political conditions and who you're running against. So, I mean, maybe that's a little cliche to say just put your mind to it, but that's my best guess.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. All right. Let's do two more questions because I think that will take us to a good time. Okay, so Aldo is up next, and Aldo has typed a question here. And it is, I've noticed a trend of at least people in my chapter always falling back on the NYC DSA model of running, quote, non-cadre, end quote, candidates and effectively compromising candidates on select issue to how best influence on system. Question. Are people still hearing me? Did I lose connection there?
Good for a
I
second,
don't
but
know.
you're back now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's all those questions, and Sarah is raising a hand. So, and other panelists can get on stack to raise hands too, but we'll go to Sarah first.
So I really wanted to talk about this because I actually visited New York City DSA to canvass for Zoran, and it was amazing. I was really impressed and I learned a lot. And there are a few things I want to point out because I think there's a bad habit on our side of DSA of treating NYC DSA like it's sort of just the big bad enemy who does reformist things because they're evil or something. Um, and but what I found there is that what happens in New York City DSA is kind of a natural result of the pressures they're under and the strategy they're employing. And so what I think I saw is that they're organizing at a huge scale, and actually they often are running cadre candidates or people who come from deep within DSA. Oftentimes they're developing their own leaders, but I think the problem that's being run into, or one of the problems, is that running campaigns and organizing for electoral work is so overwhelming and disorienting, and sort of there's so many snap, immediate decisions to be made that you can kind of unconsciously start walking down a path away from your politics unless you have a really clear plan to stay grounded in them. So, like, well, why do people in your chapter keep doing this? Well, I mean, I don't know it specifically, but I would imagine like thought process might be, well, come on, we can pass this reform, we can do this policy, we've got this chance to elect this person. And sometimes I think we can it's easy for socialists to get so focused on the next win, the next vote, the next proposal, the next moment of the campaign. They lose sight of the fact that we have to be fighting to build this mass socialist movement. And so, while I think there's kind of a good instinct there, wins can galvanize people. Getting into office can grow a chapter, it can transform things and change things. I don't want to write that off. Winning votes is not enough to win power. And it is not necessarily enough to build DSA. And if you become too focused on immediate tasks, you will actually, not only will you lose sight of the broader project, eventually you will run into contradictions and problems with your own immediate tasks. Because if you're always just prioritizing the short-termist strategy, what do you do when your electeds conflict with one another? What do you do when someone sees that it is in their interest to stop supporting DSA, right? Because they can win elections more easily if they capitulate in that way. It's never going to be easy and popular to convince people of socialism and capitalist society. We have to do it anyway because we can make it easier and more popular, but only if we are clearly determined for our broader strategy of party building rather than just individual candidates.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And now I will go to Isaac and then Jordan. So go ahead, Isaac.
Well, I think that in the specific text of that question, I think non-cadre candidates don't necessarily build power. I think that if you're running a candidate who is not sticking to your line as a chapter or as an organization, all you're doing is elevating that candidate as themselves. You're not elevating the organization, you're not elevating the principles that you have, and you're not elevating the socialist movement. And that's why I think it's important that DSA chapters and DSA National as a whole needs to start prioritizing cadre candidates that are willing to, even when it's an unpopular position, take the DSA position rather than the safe option or the progressive Democrat option. Like, there's been some criticism of Zoran Mamdani lately, him sort of backtracking on abolition and on Palestine. And I understand there's some, inside, considerations that they have to take. But at the same time, I don't appreciate, I guess, a large scale DSA candidate backtracking so openly on the democratically decided platform that the organization put forward. And even one that he was at the convention that we decided. He was a keynote speaker at that convention. And now he's backtracking on this platform that we democratically decided. And personally, I don't think that is something that I support. And running cadre candidates is something that I think, as a chapter, as an organization, and as a movement, we need to focus on more.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. And now Jordan.
Yeah, I think I've had some people like this in our chapter that I've kind of like gone back and forth on this kind of question with. And the one thing that I always want to ask them is like, what does it mean to build power to you? Like, what does power look like? And like, what can that actually do? Like, and a lot of times I think people get stuck in this idea. And like, I don't think it's necessarily personal failing of any of these people. I think you just like if you look at things like social media and stuff, like how prevalent that is, I think people think that like having a lot of followers on Instagram or like being in the news a lot, like being able to like get quotes and stuff like that. I think people attribute that to power, but the real power lies behind the scenes. Like the real people that are making the shots, they're not the ones that are posting on, they don't drop an Instagram post that like, makes bills come through and stuff like that. So I'm kind of glad that you brought up Zoran because it's like, yes, we have a candidate who is a cadre DSA member, but if he's capitulating on a lot of the core DSA ideals, then do we really have a DSA candidate or do we have a candidate that came from DSA? And I think there is a difference there where like if he just stuck hard and true and said, yep, like I'm with DSA and this is what I believe, that is DSA building power. When he says, yeah, I'm with DSA, but like I don't actually believe all this stuff they said, that is Zoran building power. And like DSA is just kind of like a byline in the articles. So, and one of the other things that when I kind of like talked like with like one particular person on this, like asking like, what does building power mean? Like, where are we going towards? I got told straight up, like, I don't know. All I know is that this works right now. And that's all I need to think about. Like, I think Sarah brought it up where it's like, you have to have an end goal in mind and you have to have a path to get there. And without that kind of clear guideline, you can get diverted anywhere. But if you have your clear goals, even though they might feel hard, even though something might be enticing, you like by like sitting down and talking about it with your comrades and all this kind of stuff, you will understand that even though that path might look enticing, that's going to lead you in the wrong direction. You should have a clear, solid direction that you want to go, and you have to keep pushing for that, no matter what the outside influence are telling you. And I think, unfortunately, we're seeing that a little bit with Zoran, where it's like, he has like Obama staffers and stuff like that. And it's probably making it more likely that he will win the candidacy in November. But does that mean that DSA is gaining power in New York City? I would argue not so much.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. All right. So we're going to do the last question now. I know it's been a long panel, everyone, but thank you for sticking through all the way, panelists and participants. So Eli is not in the meeting anymore. So I don't think Eli can give their question, but then we will move on to Diego. So Diego has written a question, and the question is, some political tendencies in DSA have insisted that building a political party is impossible because US law does not allow for party-like structures to truly exist. With two representatives of chapters which have taken some of the largest steps towards building a political party, how have DSA partyists taken steps to build a party in spite of US law? How do they see a path towards a political party? That's a good question. Okay, same deal, hand raise. Who has thoughts on this? Isaac, go ahead.
I remember when that article was written, and I've been around for the conversations where it's used as a cudgel against people who want electoral discipline from our electeds. And I believe that we shouldn't have to constrain ourselves to U.S. law. Like we're socialists. We don't believe in bourgeois institutions like the U.S. criminal justice system. And that doesn't mean we have to break the law. It means we have to circumvent the law. We have to find loopholes. We have to work within the bounds of our system to circumvent the system, if that makes any sense. So really, I think this argument that some people put forward as, a party is illegal, quote unquote, is just, it doesn't mean anything because anything is illegal. Revolution is illegal. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do a revolution. That doesn't mean we're not going to help our homeless neighbors when helping our homeless neighbors is illegal. We're not going to not feed our homeless neighbors because feeding our homeless neighbors is illegal in many places, including Idaho, in our capital city of Boise. We're not just going to not do that because we're socialists. We believe in it. We don't believe in bourgeois institutions. Civil.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. Okay. Not seeing anyone else with hands raised. So I think we will wrap up there. I know it's been a long panel, everyone, but thank you all so much for sticking it out. Thank you also to the folks who were there earlier and had to drop off, of course. And especially thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Aidan, as well, for presenting the draft resolution. And yeah, we'll follow up with folks with more info on the draft resolution. Definitely check out the campaign in Idaho. Isaac shared a little bit about that and where you can follow along and support. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day weekend, comrades. Solidarity forever. And yeah, see you again in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.